I'd like to welcome everybody. We are going to have the American Chemical Society presenting Preparing a Resume. My name is Mary Moore. I've been a career consultant for 7 years and doing career management for over 10 years. And I will be answering your questions online. If you look on your computer, you will see where you have a question area. If you will choose that, and that's where you can type in questions, and I will be able to answer those questions for you. With the presentation, you're not able to get a copy of this. However, if you go to acs.org under the Career Services, they do have a section where you can get material for resumes. And right now, all of you will be muted. However, when we get to the question and answers at the end of the session, we will unmute those for you. I would like to introduce you to today's speaker. Her name is Lisa Balbus. She's a PhD. She's been an ACS career consultant for over 20 years. Lisa is a scientific communication consultant and author of Non-Traditional Careers for Chemists, which was published by Oxford University in 2007. And Lisa?
Okay, thanks, Mary. And I also want to mention behind the scenes we have Leon Gould from ACS staff who is providing our technical support. So we should be in good shape today. So welcome to this afternoon's webinar, or this morning's, depending on where you are, on preparing a resume. So we're going to start off by finding out where you are. Where is your resume? Do you not have a resume? Are you just getting started? Do you have one, but maybe it's not quite up to date? Or do you have a current resume that you're really happy with and you're just here to learn how you can maybe tweak it and make it a little bit better? So if you would just take a minute and type your answers into the question panel, which again should be on the right side of your computer, and just type in and let us know. Do you have a resume? Do you not have a resume? Do you think it's good? Or do you know that you need a significant amount of help? So if you will go ahead and type your answers in there, that will help us decide how to present things and at what level we should be talking to. Okay? So while people are typing their answers in, I'll ask Mary. Mary also does a lot of resume reviews. And what state do you think most people that you see are in, Mary?
They have draft resumes, and they would like improvements.
Okay. And I would probably agree with that. Most people that I see have some sort of a resume. I have never seen a perfect resume, and I've counted. I'm sure I've seen at least hundreds, if not thousands, by this point. There's always a way to improve it. Even my resume, every time I look at it, I'm like, oh, I could make this a little bit better. So your resume is never perfect. It's also a living document, so as your career changes, you have to keep updating it and keep adding new information in there. Okay. So let's go ahead and get started while y'all are still thinking and hopefully typing in your answers there so we'll know what you want from this session today. We're going to start off by making you do a little bit of work and start making you look at things from the other side. So we want you to put on your employer hat for just a few minutes and look at some resumes from the employer's point of view and try to think about how they look at things, and this will help you revise your own. So what we're going to do is show you 3 resumes. All 3 resumes represent the same person who's applying for a job with a pharmaceutical company. So we want you to imagine that you're the hiring manager for this company and you're looking to hire a PhD level chemist. We're going to give you about 10 seconds to review 3 resumes. Again, these all represent the same person. They're just different versions of their resume. And then after you've looked at all 3 resumes, go ahead and type in to the question panel and tell us which one of these resumes you would pick, which of these people you would call in for an interview for this position. Okay, so if everybody's clear on the directions, I'm going to go ahead and switch here over to Word. Okay, so here is your first resume, and you have 10 seconds to look at this one. Okay, and we picked 10 seconds because that's about how long a hiring manager will spend looking at a resume before they decide which pile they're going to put it into. Okay, so there you go. You're done with the first one. You know everything about that. Here's resume B. Again, this is the same information, just organized a little bit differently. It's all about the same person. Okay, you got that one? Moving on. If you're a hiring manager, you may have several hundred resumes to screen for a position, so you need to look at these quickly. So here's Exhibit C. So this is the third version of this person's resume. So go ahead and look at this one very quickly. Okay, time's up. So you've had a chance to look at all three of these resumes. Go ahead and type in the question panel and tell us which of these three resumes you like the best, which one of these people you would call in for an interview. Again, we're asking you to put on your employer hat, and you have to remember that it's going to cost your company significant amounts of money to bring somebody in for an interview, so you want to make sure that you get the right person. Okay, and Mary, are we seeing any answers?
Oh, yes.
Oh, good. Okay.
We are seeing quite a few. It's assorted. Some of them like A, a lot of them like B, and a lot of them like C.
Oh, so they're all over the place. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, and we don't have a quantitative way to see the answers. So remember which one you liked. We're going to use these resumes as examples throughout the workshop. We'll come back and look at them again later on, and we'll try to talk about why you liked the one you liked, what you liked about it and what you didn't like. Okay? So now that you've had a little bit of chance to start thinking as a hiring manager, let's go ahead and talk about what we're going to do today. Okay? What we're going to talk about today is obviously your resume. And so the first thing we have to talk about is, what is a resume? Why do you have a resume? The most important thing to remember is this little tip down at the bottom, is that the purpose of the resume is to get you an interview. A resume is never going to get you a job. It's just going to get you to the interview, to the next step in the process. The interview is what will get you the actual job. So remember what the purpose of the resume is, so you can tell if it's doing what it needs to be doing. A resume is a marketing tool. It's a way of selling yourself to a potential employer. It's a way of convincing them that you are able to do the job and that you're excited about doing the job. It also is a way of differentiating yourself from other candidates who may have similar skills, but you want to show that you're a better match for that particular position than they are. A few things that a resume is not. It's not a complete listing of everything you've ever done in your career. It's not a curriculum vitae. A CV is used when you're applying for academic positions. It's significantly different from a resume, and we're not going to be talking about those today. So if you're interested in academic positions, again, if you go online to acs.org, in the careers area, there's information in there about what you should do to make a CV. And a resume is also not a substitute for a job application. If a company asks you to fill out a particular form, you're going to have to do that. You might be able to attach a resume to it. Okay? So, Mary, why should we, I'm sorry?
Okay.
Why would we not list absolutely everything we've ever done on our resume?
Because your resume is to intrigue people to call you in and learn more about you. Your resume is to set you up for an interview. All your skills are not relevant. You want to put your main skills that you are unique. You can list everything, and you can make an encyclopedia of your life. It is not a picture of your life. It's a picture of what a company and what you have to offer. That is what a purpose of a resume is.
Exactly.
So you can be called in and for the interview so they can learn more about you.
Exactly. You want to put in there what's relevant to this particular job for which you are applying. I often tell people that I'm career counseling for, you can have what I would call like a library copy of your resume where you list absolutely everything that you've ever done professionally, but you never send that to anybody. Every time you're going to apply for a job or apply to a company, you take that library version and you delete the things that are not relevant to that particular position. You rewrite things a little bit so it's obvious that you're the best fit for that particular job. So the resume is really a targeted marketing tool, emphasizing your best skills. And like Mary said, you're trying to intrigue them to make them want to talk to you some more. So just to get them interested enough that they're going to call you in for the interview, which is where you're really going to sell yourself. From the employer's point of view, as you saw just a few minutes ago when you had to review all those resumes so quickly, their purpose is to screen out candidates who don't fit. They're going to look at each resume for 20 to 30 seconds to decide very quickly, do you go in the maybe pile or do you go in the no pile? And the first 7 seconds are especially crucial. So it's really important that your resume scans well, that the most important information stands out and is up at the top. Okay. When you're preparing your resume, a couple of things to keep in mind. Specific is better than general. If you can give specific accomplishments, and especially in the sciences, we like quantitative accomplishments, so using numbers is always better. Concise is better than verbose. They're going to be skimming these, so you don't need to use complete sentences. You want to write as concisely as possible. You always want to be completely accurate, completely truthful, and extremely careful. A lot of employers will use a single error or typo to disqualify a resume. These days they get so many resumes, they're just looking for a reason to weed you out. So don't give them any of those opportunities. I often say that I have never seen a resume without a typo. No matter how many I look at, there's always something that either is an actual typo or a spelling mistake or something that looks like a typo. So always have somebody else look at it and give you honest feedback on what needs to be improved. Okay? So those are kind of some general tips to keep in mind as we're going through the rest of this afternoon. We're going to start by talking about the resume structure, excuse me, which is really the content. You know, what is the information that's in there and how is that organized? And that's probably where we'll spend most of our time. We'll then talk a little bit about formatting and style and some things that you can do to make your resume more easily readable. We'll talk about the components of your resume portfolio. You never send a naked resume. You always send it at least with a cover letter, and there are some other documents that you may want to send as well. And at the end, we'll talk a little bit about getting started or refining your resume, helping you do whatever you need to do in your particular situation. Okay? Excuse me. So let's start with the structure of a resume. Most resumes have, kind of 3 major sections. There's the introduction, there's the background, and then there's supporting information. And this is pretty much the order they go in, so we're just going to go through them in the order that they would be on a resume. The introduction has the basic information. It's kind of like the headline. That's the very first part that they're going to skim very quickly. The background is going to have more detailed information that's going to be proof of what's listed above. And then the supporting information is other stuff that you can include if you have room, but it might not be as important. Okay, so let's go through each of these. Okay, obviously the heading, the very first part, is going to be your contact information. And yes, I once saw a resume that did not have the person's name on it. So you must have your name on your resume. You're going to have your address. A business address used to be almost required. Now a lot of people use their home address if they don't want their employer to know they're looking for a job. You're going to have all your contact information, so you will have your email address, and that will be a professional email address. It can be, a Yahoo or a Gmail, but not hotbabe@yahoo.com. There's enough places that you can get a free email address, so you want to make sure that you get one that gives a professional image. You also want to include a phone number, 1, maybe 2 phone numbers, again, that you will answer professionally. Once you start giving it out on a resume, you need to expect that every call is a potential employer. You may want to have a web page. We're seeing more and more of these. If you don't have your own personal web page, a lot of people are using their LinkedIn web page. If you're not familiar with LinkedIn, that's a whole other topic, but I would encourage you to get on there and check that out. And that really is a place that you can almost have an online resume. You can have a lot more information in there for people to look at and just put that URL right in the heading part of your own resume. So this is really, your contact information. This is how the employer is going to get a hold of you when they want to call you in for that interview. This should, again, all be professional information and things that are answered professionally that you're treating professionally. If you have a foreign-sounding name and or have education overseas, but you either are a U.S. citizen or a permanent resident, you may want to put that information in this section just because there still are a lot of employers who will not hire people who have visa issues. So if that's not an issue for you, this might be a place to put that. If that is an issue for you, then don't mention it until they bring it up. Okay? The next thing that you might have on your resume is an objective. And this is a source of debate between career consultants as to whether or not you need an objective. There are reasons to have an objective. The objective is basically a description of the type of position for which you are looking. So if it's on there, it may match exactly what they're looking for, so that would be great. It helps you clarify what you're looking for, so just the act of writing it makes you think about, well, what is it exactly that I'm looking for? So that can be helpful. Some of the arguments against having an objective, it usually isn't an exercise in creative writing, trying to get it, specific enough but not too specific. It does narrow your options. If you say you're looking for a particular type of job and they say, oh, well, this person might be able to do this other job also, oh, but wait, their objective says that's not what they want. So it may knock you out of the running for some other kinds of positions. So there are advantages and disadvantages.
But Lisa, how do we handle that dilemma?
The advice that I give people is you should definitely have an objective. Whether or not you put it on your resume is a personal decision, but you should have something written down describing what it is you're looking for. If you're open to a couple of different types of positions, you may have multiple objectives, and you may put different ones on different versions of your resume. So you're always going to tailor the objective to wherever you're submitting your resume. So if you're sending it to a place, you can have have an objective on there. If you're going to be submitting it to a more general place, like, for example, a career fair where a number of different employers are going to look at it, you may choose not to put an objective on that particular version. So, but all these different versions of objectives could be part of your, what we call the library copy of your resume, that copy that has absolutely everything that only you see. Okay, so to give you some examples, the first three examples on this slide are not wonderful, to put it mildly. The first one, to join a group to reach new horizons in productivity. That doesn't tell me anything about what the person can really do or what they really want to do. And if you look at all of these, they're all very general. They don't really tell me anything, and some of them aren't even good grammar. A better example is the last one on here, somebody who's looking for a position as an organic chemist in a medium-sized biotech company, taking advantage of their knowledge of medicinal chemistry and organic synthesis. So that tells me exactly what they're looking for. It also tells me something about what they can do. So that's a great objective if that's what you want and if you're sending it to medium-sized biotech companies. I would probably not send this to Pfizer or Merck or a very large pharmaceutical company because they're going to right away say, well, that's not, they don't want to work for us. Why did they send this here? So again, you have to make sure they match. But a good objective will be about 2 to 3 lines, and we'll talk about, the type of position you want, the type of company you want to work for, and what you can do for that company. Okay, so the objective is kind of a description of what you want, what you're looking for. The next section that you may or may not have is a highlight section. And this is kind of a summary of what you have done. So it's a summary of what you're going to be able to do for the company. This can help to guide the reader's attention as they look through the rest of the resume. It may make some skills explicit that might otherwise be kind of buried later in the resume. And it gives you a chance to highlight those particular skills and accomplishments that you really want to expand on in your next position. So some examples of some good highlights, bullet items that you might have. And a highlight section would probably have on the order of maybe 3 to probably no more than 6 bullets. It would be some of your most significant accomplishments, the things that you're best at. The words that we use to start these are good words to think about. Experienced in the synthesis, purification, and characterization of organic compounds. Skilled in, adept at, all these kinds of things. So this is telling me a nice summary of what this person can do. Okay, anything that you have in the highlight section, you want to make sure that you have supporting information for this later on in the resume. Okay, and by later on in the resume, we're talking about the background section. This is the most important section of your resume. Hopefully the introduction section has kind of piqued the hiring manager's interest, and they're like, oh, this person might fit. Let me look a little bit closer. When they look closer, this is where they're going to look, is the background section. Okay, this is probably the longest section of your resume, and this is where you're going to spend the most of your time in crafting this very carefully. So the 3 kinds of information that you're going to have in here are your education, your previous professional experience, and then other relevant skill information. Okay? You're going to have both education and either research, work, professional experience, whatever you want to call that section. One of the general rules of the resume is that you always put the most important stuff or your strongest assets first. So if you're a recent graduate and your strongest selling point is that you have the latest, greatest education, you know, you've just come out of school, you know what's hot right now, you would put your education first and your professional experience later. If you've been out in the workplace for a while and your strongest selling point is that you know what it's like to work out in the world, you've been there, then you would put your professional experience first and your education would come later. So whatever's your strongest selling point is what goes first. And then within each section, everything is always listed in reverse chronological order. We want to know, what have you done for me lately? So you start with the most recent and work your way back within each section. Okay, so let's go through each of these just in a little bit more detail. Again, the education section, for each degree that you obtained, you're going to list the degree, the field, probably chemistry if you're listening to this, but it could be something else. The name of the university, the location, which would be the city and state, and then the year in which you earned that degree. If you have not earned the degree yet, you would put anticipated or expected, and then put a month and year. The employer knows that that may change, especially if you're a graduate student, that may change a few months in either direction, but at least gives them an idea of when you could be expected to be available. If it's a graduate degree, you want to include with that the thesis or dissertation title and the name of your advisor. You can list your grades in this section if you want, but only if they are very high, by which we're talking about probably over a 3 or a 3.5 on a 4.0 scale. And you can list either your grades overall, or you can list just your grades in your major. If that GPA is higher, you can go ahead and do that. This is probably more important for people who are undergraduates or recent graduates after you've been out in the workplace for a few years, or once you've gone through graduate school. It's really not necessary to put your grades on there anymore. Okay. The other section that you're going to have either immediately before or after education is your professional experience. again, you're going to list the positions in reverse chronological order. So you're going to start with the most recent position and work your way back. Your postdoc is a job. That counts. Your graduate work is a job. That counts. So you would list that under your professional experience. The information you're going to include is the title of the position that you held, the organization that you worked for. You may want to include city and state if it's not something that a lot of people have heard about. You're going to include the dates that you worked there. Usually we suggest month and year, but again, it's whatever format you want as long as you're consistent throughout. And then underneath each position, you're going to list your most significant accomplishments. So the things that you're most proud of that you did at that company. And these are the things that you're going to be able to do for this new company to which you're applying. Usually you want to start with an action word, starting with a verb, and then describe the impact or the results that you had. You don't want to say responsible for something, because that doesn't really say that you did anything. A good accomplishment might be something like synthesized and characterized 25 analogs of natural product for use as, some sort of drug in some sort of drug assay. So again, quantitative, stating exactly what you did so that people can tell, well, okay, well, they synthesized all these compounds over there, so they're probably pretty good at organic synthesis. They know about natural products. They know about drug assays. Most of your accomplishments are going to be on the order of 1 to 2 lines. No more than that. Again, sentence fragments. You don't have to write a complete sentence. And you're probably going to have on the order of 4 to 6 accomplishments per job title. That can change, especially if it's a job that's not really relevant to what you're doing now. You may only have 1 or 2 accomplishments under there, but that's fine. Okay. Some other things that you may want to include, if there are some special techniques that you know how to use that maybe weren't mentioned in any of your accomplishments, if you want to have a section where you list specific instrumentation, if you know some specialized computer programs, please don't waste space on your resume listing that you know how to use Word and Excel. We kind of assume that you know how to use those. But if you know how to use Sybil or Macromodel or some more specific things, or if you know how to program macros in Excel, those kinds of things you might want to include. Languages also can be listed on here if you speak or write other languages, either fluently or at least to some degree. We're working in a much more global culture than we used to, and so being able to communicate with other people is very important, and so knowledge of other languages is becoming important as well.
Lisa, what are some of the special techniques or instrumentation that you may want to list? Besides just, do you have a good example of something that's very unique?
Oh, most things are going to show up in your accomplishments, but say you have, X-ray diffraction, or if you're a synthetic organic chemist, but maybe you know a lot about HPLC and you're actually able to take an HPLC apart and fix it and put it back together again. So if you kind of have more than the basic knowledge or more than the typical knowledge of some kind of instrumentation, you might want to list that. There's also sometimes special software is used to run different kinds of instrumentation, so this will be a good place to list that. A lot of times the instrumentation section is not really read by a person, but it would be read by a computer when they're scanning resumes looking for keywords. So again, you want to think about it from the employer's point of view. Well, might they be looking for somebody who knows Macromodel or Gaussian? And then you want to make sure that that word is in your resume somewhere. So an instrumentation or a special skills section can be a good place to put that. Okay, so we've kind of gone through the main bulk of the resume, the most important stuff. If you still have room, there are some other things that you can include. And we've mentioned earlier that the resume itself should only be 2 pages long. It's never going to be longer than 2 pages. If it goes longer than 2 pages, you're going to have to take some stuff out and make some addendums. So the third kind of main chunk of your resume is the supporting information. And this is really external validation of all the things that you've talked about above. Okay, this could be awards and publications, presentations, references, all those sorts of things. Okay, so let's talk about just a couple of these. Your publications, presentations, and patents. Obviously, you have to have a current list of what all these are. If you don't have this, nobody else is going to have this. You can list them, again, reverse chronological order, using the format of whatever your favorite journal is. Whatever's probably the most preeminent journal in your field would be a good one to pick. Just, again, make sure that all your references are in the same style, that they're all consistent. If you have room, you can certainly list these on your resume itself. If not, you have an addendum that lists everything, and you may just want to have a line on there that says 3 publications in peer-reviewed journals, 5 U.S. patents granted, and 14 presentations. List available upon request. And that's kind of a judgment call as to how you want to handle that. Remember that you can list publications once they're in press or once they're published. If you have submitted the manuscript, so you've actually mailed it to the journal, you can list it as submitted to and the journal name. If it's something that you're just working on or something that's sitting on your advisor's desk waiting for edits, you cannot list it. You really don't want to list manuscripts in preparation. You only want to list things that have at least been submitted to the journal. With presentations, you want to list both poster presentations and oral presentations, but not oral presentations to your own department. Those don't count. But any invited talks, anything you did at ACS regional, national meetings, all those kinds of things would count, and you would make sure to list them. Okay. Another section that you might have would be professional awards, honors, something like that. If you have a number of awards, again, you don't want to have a whole section if you only have one, so you may have to group things. If it's an award that you won, include the name of the award, the date, and then a little bit of information about the award. If it's the Smith Award, I have no idea what that means. Was that perfect attendance? Was that you were voted by the students the best laboratory assistant for the semester? Was it an outstanding teaching award? You know, what was the effort for which you received that award? So really you should be able to do this on a line or, you know, 2 lines at the most. Tell us a little bit about the award and what it was that you got that award for. You would also want to include any leadership positions that you held with professional organizations. So if you work with your local chapter, if you're an officer in the Younger Chemists Committee, something like that, you would include those. They could be listed under professional activities. Even if you haven't held any leadership positions, you would still want to mention that you're a member of the organization and the dates of your membership. If you have non-scientific activities, but they show leadership or they show, you know, business acumen. If you were treasurer of your sorority, for example, you may want to list that because it shows that you know something about handling finances, balancing books, something that a lot of people don't have experience with before they move into industry. You have to be a little bit careful to not list things that might be controversial or that, you know, an individual might have a problem with. For example, if you were president of your local chapter of People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, you might not want to list that if you were applying to pharmaceutical companies because those 2 things tend to not go along. So you have to, you know, be a little bit careful about how you list things and what you list things on there. Okay. You're also going to have references. You're going to have 3 references. That's kind of the typical number. Again, just like the library copy of the resume, you may have more than 3 references, but you only send 3 to each company. Some people, this is another thing that the career consultants discuss from time to time, some people recommend putting the name, address, contact information of each of your references right in your resume, so sending it along with the resume. Some employers like that because they like to contact your references before they contact you. Other people say, no, you shouldn't put your references on your resume because you want to warn them of who's likely to be calling. So you can, before you pass their name out, you can call them and say, well, Dr. Smith, Pfizer's going to call you, and I'm applying for a job there as an analytical chemist in this particular lab doing this thing. And that way your people who are serving as references for you know which of your skills to speak about. You don't want them to talk about what a great organic chemist, synthetic organic chemist you are if you're applying for a job as an analytical chemist. So it lets you control things a little bit better. Kind of a rule of thumb is that earlier in your career, especially people just getting out of undergraduate, just getting out of school, they don't have a lot of business experience to speak for them, so they're going to be more likely to have their references on their resume. As you get further along in your career and you may not want certain people to know that you're looking for a job, you're more likely to leave your references off. In any event, you want to certainly talk to them ahead of time before you give their information to anybody, and make sure that these are people who are going to be strong advocates for you, who are going to speak very well about your skills and know a lot about you. You want to give them each a copy of your resume so that they'll be able to see what you're telling other people, and it will also help remind them of things that you did that they may have forgotten about. And keep them informed on how your job search is going. Let them know what types of positions you're applying for, what types of feedback you're getting, all this kind of information. This will help them be a better reference for you, and we'll also keep reminding them that, yes, you're out there looking for things. Okay? If there's not room to put this on your 2-page resume, or you've decided that for whatever reason you don't want to put it on there, you could have a separate page titled references that would be a component of the resume portfolio that we mentioned earlier. Probably the most important thing with references is to make sure that they are people who are going to speak enthusiastically about you and about your skills and about your background. Somebody who's prestigious is nice, but not if they're just going to say, well, yes, I met this person at a conference and we chatted for 5 minutes. You want somebody who really knows what you can do and can speak well about that. Some things you want to make sure not to include anywhere on your resume: your age, marital status, number of children, religion. You can kind of see this is all personal information. Especially in the United States, it's illegal for companies to ask about most of this information, and they don't want it. It just muddies the water. So none of this should be on your resume. In other countries, some of this information is expected and even almost required. So if you're applying for positions in other countries, you need to find out what the standard is there and make sure that you're writing what they expect to see.
But Lisa, why don't we want to put our age or the past salary history in the headings?
Good question, Mary. You really don't want to put anything in there, first of all, that's going to give them a reason to discriminate against you. So especially for some people who are more experienced chemists, they're worried about age discrimination, including age is a bad thing to do. Salary history can work against you, either way. It may be that you're making too much money, and so they know they can't pay that, and they're going to bump you out, or you're not making very much at all, and they're going to think, well, why isn't this person getting paid very much? Maybe they're not worth it. So you don't want any of this kind of information on there, anything that's going to cause them to discard you. You just want to be talking about the job and your skills and your ability to do the particular job for which you're going to be hired. Okay? So now that you're experts in what should and should not be in a resume, let's go ahead and critique an ineffective resume, because that's so much fun, is to look at somebody else's and see what they've done wrong, and that's so much easier than looking at your own. So we're going to go ahead and go back and look at the resumes from Nico that we saw earlier. I'm going to pick example A, which has a few structural and content defects. So I'm going to go ahead and let you just pick out a couple of those and go ahead and put them in the question and answer box. Okay, so here's for Nico again, and we'll go back up to version A of his resume, and you should be able to see that. So if you want to just pick out a few things that you think, he could improve on in his resume, go ahead and do that and put them in the question box. Okay. And Mary's going to tell me that we have all kinds of them coming in, right? And I bet Mary can notice a few also.
We are getting a lot of responses.
Good, because for some reason I'm not seeing any, so I'm trusting you. Okay, some of the things that I had noted, the objective is a little vague, doesn't really tell me anything. There's not a lot of detail. I have no idea what field his degree was in or what his dissertation was on, so I don't really know what he did. There's a lot of personal information down at the bottom that I really don't need to know. And probably the one that annoys me the most is there's absolutely no dates on this resume. So I have no idea when he did any of this stuff. Is he a postdoctoral fellow now, or was that 20 years ago? Okay, so Mary, are there any others that you would point out?
I think you hit quite a few of those. And
yeah, we worked hard to make this one bad.
Yes, I mean, it is just like throw it away and start over.
Yeah.
And I think that's what you're seeing from a lot of the comments from the attendees.
Okay, well, good. So yes, it's very easy to critique somebody else's. It's a little harder to critique your own. But this at least gives you a start. Okay, so let's go back to here. Okay, so you've seen, some of these things that you can do wrong. So let's talk just a little bit about formatting and style. Okay. Remember we said earlier you really want to keep it to 2 pages in length. I would almost say always 2 pages. On rare occasions you might go to 3. You want to pick a standard font and use only one font throughout the whole thing and not a script font. You want something easy to read. Font size of 11 or 12, which is big enough that it's easy to read but gives you room to work with. You're going to print it on white or off-white paper, black ink, preferably a laser printer. I don't know that many people have inkjet printers anymore, but there used to be some issues there with things running. Use bullets, use bolding, use things like that to kind of guide the reader and identify the most important information. But remember, they're only going to look at this for 30 seconds, so it needs to scan well, and whatever format you choose to use, you need to be consistent all the way through. For example, if you list one job and you list the month and the year that you worked there, then for all jobs you need to list month and year. If you decide to go with just year, that's fine, but then use just year for all of them. There's really no one way to format a resume. It's whatever you want it to look like is fine. And we actually recommend that you do not use a template that might be provided by your university's career services offices, because a lot of employers have seen those templates and they can look at it and they're like, oh yeah, we know they didn't put any effort into this, they just plugged their information into somebody else's format. So it's okay to start with that template, but then go ahead and massage it a little bit and make it work for your information. Make it your own resume. Okay. If you know you're going to be submitting it electronically, and these days the vast majority of resumes are submitted electronically, make sure that you use both technical and soft skills keywords that are appropriate. Make sure that they're in there somewhere. Especially if it's going to be sent in electronically, you want to avoid things like columns, decorative line breaks, underlining, shadowing, and italics. These are hard for scanners to read, and they may cause certain words to not get translated into the electronic version. So again, if it's going to be submitted electronically, Make it as simple as possible. I know some people who even have, a plain text version of their resume that they send electronically, but then a nicely formatted version in Word or Pages or something that they send to people. So again, you can have more than one version of your resume. Okay, so let's go back, since it's so much fun to pick on other people's resume. Let's go back and look at a resume that has an ineffective format. So we're going to go look at one of Nico's resumes again that has just a few formatting defects, and I'm going to let you put those into the question and answer section of your screen. So we'll go back over to Word, and we want to look at version C of his resume. Okay, and let's see if you all can find a few of the formatting problems with this particular version. Okay, and while you're typing those in, this time I'll let Mary talk first since I took all the good ones last time. Mary, what problems do you see with this particular resume?
I'm trying to see where we're at.
Oh, sorry.
Answering quite a few questions. We've got the audience that is really intrigued.
Good.
And trying to help them out as much as I can here.
I'm trying to make you do too many things at once.
Yes, walking and chew bubble gum at the same time is a nice thing to list if you have it on, need it on your resume. Okay, so we're looking at.
Yeah, Nico's resume version C has a few formatting issues.
Oh, yes. I mean, we've got all sorts of different font sizes and
and even fonts.
Yeah, and I say a couple interesting fonts. And it's not really easy to read because of it. I'm bouncing all over, and so I'm not seeing what I need to. And you got this bold and underlining going. It's not guiding my eyes.
Yeah. Well, and he's got different bullets at different levels. He's jumping all over the place.
Yeah, it's very hard to follow.
It's very hard to follow. It does not skim well. One of my personal pet peeves is that one version of his email address, but not both, is blue and underlined, which is something that Word really likes to do, and you really shouldn't let it. On the Mac, I can Apple K and get rid of that. I'm not sure how you do that on a PC, but your email address does not need to be blue and underlined because that just draws the reader's eye, and I don't think your email address is the most important thing about you. So, skim it, see how it skims, see what stands out. Is that what you want to stand out? And I don't think that that's exactly what poor Nico wanted to stand out. Okay, so while y'all are still picking on him, let's go back over here. Okay, and let's talk for just a couple minutes of kind of some of the other components of your resume portfolio. We talked about you're going to have maybe a library version of your resume. You're at least going to have multiple versions of your resume that have been sent to different places. You're going to have a cover letter. As we said, you never send a naked resume. You always at least send it with a cover letter. You may have a list of references that are sent as an addendum. You may have a research summary that you send with it, and we'll talk about that in just a second. You may have some other marketing documents if you have a patent review, a management philosophy, kind of depending on what the position that you're applying for would determine whether or not you have some of these other things. Okay, so probably the cover letter is one of the most important pieces of this. And again, the purpose of the cover letter is to get them to read the resume, and then the purpose of the resume is to get them to read the interview, or to call you in for an interview. So at each step, you're just trying to move them one step, just move them to the next step along in the process. The cover letter, you're really trying to point out the close match between your experience and this particular position. If possible, you want to let a little bit of your personality come through, talk about your credibility, talk about the background research that you've done on this company to show that you've done your homework, and again, differentiate you from other applicants. Okay, so the cover letter is probably going to be about 3 paragraphs. You're going to have a very brief introduction, that you're writing in response to this ad or however you found out about the position. Your body is going to expand on your qualifications, and especially if you have a job description, you're going to exactly address every single qualification that's listed in there, every single requirement for the job, and how you meet it. And then finally, in the conclusion, you're going to have a call for action. So you're going to ask them to do something, make sure they have your contact information, and let them know how enthusiastic you are about this position, and maybe tell them that you'll contact them again in X number of time if you don't hear from them, and then follow up and make sure to do that. And again, if you go to the ACS website, there are some examples of cover letters in there that you can look at. The research summary I mentioned earlier is something that we've been seeing more of lately, especially biotechnology companies, and starting to see pharmaceutical companies looking for this. We talked about that the resume is all sentence fragments, very concise. The research summary would be complete sentences, probably on the order of 1 to 2 pages. And this is, again, they're judging not only the research you did, but your writing skills. Can you communicate in the written form? This is where you would include graphics, diagrams, mechanisms, those kinds of things. You can think about this maybe at the level of an abstract of a journal article, kind of that level of writing. So you don't want to go into too much technical detail, but you do want to talk about why you did the research, what parts you did, what the results are, and then where the research is going to go on from there. And there are examples of these on the ACS website as well. Okay, so we've talked about a lot of stuff over the last 50 minutes or so. We've talked about the structure, both the content and the organization. We've talked about formatting and making it easy for the reader to follow and to skim through. We've talked about some of the other pieces that you're going to definitely have ready and maybe send along with the resume, depending on exactly what you're doing. So let's talk just real briefly about how you might start improving your resume. If you don't have a resume yet, you might start by saying, well, how would I describe my career objective? What kind of a job am I looking for? That can be very helpful to help frame the rest of it. What is it that I'm looking for out there? And then conversely, what is in me? What knowledge, skills, and abilities do I have to offer a potential employer? What am I good at? And why might they want to hire me? And then collecting, obviously the easiest part is collecting all the information on your previous employers and the dates that you worked for them and all those facts that are not arguable. If you already have a resume, you're going to start refining it. Well, what elements of my background and my expertise could I more effectively highlight? What is it that an employer might want? What am I really good at, and does that stand out here? What are my most significant accomplishments, and are they listed on here in a quantitative format that a prospective employer will be able to understand? And then again, how can I improve the structure and the formatting so that it flows better? And again, a lot of this you're going to have somebody else read it, and someone who will give you, constructive feedback. You don't want somebody who's just going to look at it and say it's wonderful. You really want to know what they think. Okay, so we've kind of talked, again, about an awful lot of stuff today, all these different sections. Hopefully this has given you some information to help working with your own resume. We've mentioned the ACS website a lot. There's a lot of other career services available from ACS. There are personalized career consultants, which is what both Mary and I do. These are other professional chemists who volunteer to critique resumes and offer career advice. There are lots of workshops and presentations, both other webinars. In this particular series next week, we'll be talking about interviews. So after your resume successfully gets you an interview, what do you do then? So that will be next week at the same time. There are also workshops at the national meetings and sometimes at regional meetings. All kinds of information available online. We wanted to mention particularly at the ACS meeting coming up in Boston in about 6 weeks, there will be a career fair with lots of opportunities. And there will be a virtual career fair in October. So if you can't travel to Boston, or even if you can, we're going to be having an online career fair in October. So you want to keep looking for information on that as well. Okay, and we have about 5 minutes left. So I'm going to see if Mary has any questions from people that she would like me to try to answer.
Boy, we got a lot of questions.
And I was going to say, for some reason, my screen is not showing me that we have any questions at all, so I'm so glad you've been asking questions.
Can you include a research interest section if you want to apply for a postdoc?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah. Yeah, I would certainly include if you're applying in a particular group and you have a particular reason to be interested in what they're doing, you could include that maybe as part of your research summary, maybe as a separate document, or you might even, depending on in how much detail you want to go, you could in the cover letter mention, I read your recent paper on this, and I wondered why you didn't extend your work and do that, and this is an area that I'm very interested in, and so could I come, work for you and help you extend your work in this particular area. So that's a great idea. Anything that shows that you really looked into what they're doing, you understand what they're doing, and how you can contribute would be beneficial.
Also, Lisa, if I'm going to be sending a lot of this electronically, should I send it in Word or should PDF file, or how would I send it?
Well, and that's another area that we discuss emphatically. Obviously, whatever the potential employer requires, you want, they're the ones that have all the power at this particular point. So whatever format they say they want it in, make sure you send it in that format. I personally tend towards sending things in PDF format just because Word formatting changes on different computers. So your Word document might look wonderful on your computer, but you send it to me and all of a sudden the page breaks are in bizarre places. Some companies insist on having a Word version, and so you have to do it that way. I tend to think that PDF is safer, but again, some companies, the PDFs don't work well with their internal HR. So if you can find out what they want, that's always the safest way to go. And some people will send both.
Okay, I understand there's CV and then there's resume, and I'm in a university, I want to go to industry. What do I do?
If you're applying for positions in industry, you're going to write a resume, which is, again, the 2-page document that we've been talking today. If you're applying for jobs in academia, especially if you're applying for jobs, as a university professor, then you're going to write a CV, which is a much more extensive document. It's, the complete history of everything that you've ever done. We said a resume is 2 pages max. I have seen 75-page CVs because it includes every publication you've ever had, everybody that you've ever worked for, all kinds of additional information. So if you're applying in industry, then you definitely want to go with a resume. If you're applying for postdocs, you can sometimes get away with going either way. And there are, again, there's examples of CVs and more information on how to write those on the ACS website.
Okay, how do you, with today's economy and a lot of chemists and engineers and people are losing jobs, how do you handle when you're out of work looking for work and they see that lapse of time?
Okay, that's a good question. These days, really being, unemployed for a period of time is not the big deal that it used to be. It used to be that it was a big red flag. Now, pretty much everybody's been laid off, been unemployed for some period of time, so it's not a huge deal. If it gets to be a really long period of time, or if it really bothers you, you can, do some temp work or some contract work. You could take some classes. You certainly want to have an answer in the interview, well, what have you been doing with your time? You don't want to say, I've been sitting around watching Oprah all day. But you could say, I've been volunteering in my professional society. I've been taking classes to expand my knowledge in this way, whatever you've been doing. But if you've got a little gap, it's not really a big deal. Okay, we may have time for just one more question, so pick a good one.
Okay, that does not narrow it down.
Okay, well, we'll say if you have other questions that we're unable to get to today, again, look on the ACS website, see if there are examples in there. You can go find a career consultant, which is, again, what Mary and I both are, and this is somebody who will answer your specific questions. You can find somebody who works in your field. You can come to the career fair at the Boston National Meeting. There will be people there to answer all your questions.
There's a lot of people asking, can we look at the resumes? And
can we look at the resume?
Yes, and so go to acs.org under Career Services. You
Right.
can have anybody on there. You can choose who you need to.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody would be more than happy to look at your resumes and your CVs.
Absolutely. And, yeah, critique them and give you feedback. And I would encourage you to do that before you submit it to the clearinghouse for the Boston meeting. Get an outsider's opinion before you let the employers look at it.
I do have one question here.
Okay.
ACS Career Consultants at ACS are free?
That is correct. It is a free service available to ACS members. Right now, I think there's about 65 of us. We're all professional chemists who volunteer our time to help other ACS members with career issues. So, and with that, I think we're like 1 minute over our time, so I will apologize for that. As I said, if you have other questions, we'll capture these. We'll try to, answer them, some on the website. Sometimes I take them and answer them on the ACS Careers blog, so you can read those, read back issues there as well. Or you can email careers@acs.org, and our crack staff, including Leon, will find the person who can answer your question for you. And we thank you very much for being here today, and we look forward to seeing you same time next week for talking about interviews, and that will be Mary.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, everybody.